On today's episode of Future Says, we have Jan Chirkowski, Vice President of Analytics and Fleet Operations at Kongsberg. Jan is driven by the ambition of a sustainable maritime future, and he spent his career introducing state-of-the-art green and hybrid technology. He's currently focused on optimizing vessel performance and providing predictive maintenance services through machine condition monitoring. Hello and welcome to Future Says, Jan. Thanks very much for joining the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Jan, can you talk to us about how somebody like yourself with a marine engineering background has transitioned to becoming the Vice President of Analytics and Fleet Operations at Kongsberg?
Yeah, sure. So I started off. As you mentioned, I have an engineering background. I did a Masters of Engineering in Newcastle University. I started off working with products, engineering of specific products for a company for a while before transitioning into working with ship design and ship systems. And yeah, as part of that work, I was working quite closely with customers who were having some issues with their vessels, with their systems. They wanted to understand what was happening, and I started at that point using data to try and understand the sequence of events of how something was occurring, and it started becoming interesting to try and figure out, okay, what more could we do with all this data that we collect from vessels and from machines on vessels, and that's where where I was given an opportunity to lead a team of data analysts and data experts that were actually set up for that specific purpose. So it was a natural transition for me from going from being interested in data as part of the course of my engineering work to leading a team who were looking more into that and trying to figure out what value we could provide with that data.
Yeah, and you sort of said it was a natural career progression for you then. Do you think in the wider engineering field this is happening more and more? People with that engineering background are transitioning to using data because it's just core to their role now.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people who are now what we'd call data scientists in our organization are former engineers, and we even look for, when we're recruiting new people into our team, we look for people with engineering backgrounds with the knowledge of marine machinery systems, who have an interest in data, where rather than looking for data scientists who maybe are interested in marine systems, we look for the opposite, because we see that it's actually much more valuable to understand what the data is telling you as that sort of domain expert, and then being able to understand how to analyze it and transform it, it's a natural progression for a lot of people, I think. And yeah, so most of the people in my organization are former engineers.
Excellent. And so for these people that obviously understand the domain really well and understand what the data is potentially saying, how do you actually upskill them then on some of the more data science methodologies? Is there a training process in place or anything like that?
So we encourage them to look into their own learning resources that they find online, but we don't have specific training courses for that within the company, but we do encourage them to look outside of the organization and look for online resources, because there's a wealth of online resources, online communities that can help people transition into that sort of a role.
Something we hear a lot about on the show is getting the domain experts, like you say, working with some data experts and trying to build a collaboration, teamwork, approach, mentality, a sort of culture around that. Is that something you actively work on as well at Kongsberg, trying to build that data-driven mentality and culture?
Culture is extremely important, and we one challenge we have is that we see there are a lot of there's a lot of data science competence sitting all around the business, very distributed, and the challenge is to try and identify where that competence exists and try to in a way set up a community of practice so that people can identify who else is working on similar issues and collaborate together. And even in my organization, we see that people have a tendency, it's especially with those I don't know if it's particular to data science, but especially those sorts of individuals, they like to work as individuals and like to work on their own thing without really talking so much to their colleagues. So we try to encourage them to work together, to work as a team rather than just a group of individuals, and try and give them the tools and the methods to aid them in doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I know how important that is. So I know we jumped straight into the deep end there around the team and what's the makeup of that. Take a step back then again. You've been at Kongsberg, let's say 3 to 4 years, but prior to that you were over a decade at Rolls-Royce, and there was a natural progression there. So would I be right in saying it's maybe 5 or 6 years in terms of leading data teams, Jan?
Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah.
Okay, and so could you tell us about how things were then, 5 or 6 years ago, let's say, within data science and engineering in Kongsberg / Rolls-Royce? How it is today? What have been some of those big jumps that you've made already?
5 or 6 years ago, when it comes to data science, is eons. And in our industry, back then it was very, very immature. But we were, I think, one of the front runners in terms of seeing the value of trying to do this. We didn't quite understand how at the time. And one of the first things we did was say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to just collect a ton of data, and we're going to collect it from lots of different ships, and then we'll figure out afterwards what we're going to do with it. And that's sort of the first thing we did wrong in a way, even though it was a learning process, and it was a valuable thing to do. The thing that we realized afterwards was that actually you need to figure out what you want to do with the data before you start collecting it. And then once you figure out, okay, what value are you trying to provide with the data, then you figure out what data you need to provide that value.
Yeah, so always starting with that sort of business value. So is that
exactly.
That's one of the big learnings then? Are there anything else that's changed in terms of data access or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, connectivity as an example, it's actually become easier, even though it's still not easy. It's easier to get hold of the data from vessels. We have there are a lot more off-the-shelf products available to collect data. There are a lot a lot better tools and and infrastructures available to collect the data and to structure the data and to bring the data to a place where you can actually start doing something with it. So the technology has also been sort of moving steadily along with us. And we're now at the stage where we can do a lot more because the technology is mature enough for us to do so.
Yeah. And so you spoke about some of that transition over the last 5 years, some of those challenges. Do you think over the next 5 years, Jan, those challenges have been eradicated? Are there any new challenges that you expect to try reach some of your strategic objectives?
I think some of the challenges we face today that they're going to be there regardless. They may improve, but certainly over the next 5 years, I can't. Things like connectivity, vessels are always going to be at sea. They're always going to be difficult to get hold of. They're always going to lose connectivity from time to time. And also, the one big difference between what we do and what, for example, the car industry does is that every single vessel is different. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution for collecting data from machinery, for example. You need to take a one-by-one approach, which makes it difficult to scale. But these sorts of challenges, we're going to find new solutions for. So it makes it easy for us to deal with those challenges.
Yeah, and on the project sphere then, over the last 5 years, can you talk about some of the success stories you've built up in the business, some of the quick wins, or maybe some of the longer term projects that you're seeing really positive results on from that analytics and fleet operations perspective?
Yeah, I mean, some of the best projects, or some of the projects with the best sort of return on investment, have been projects that have just come from us working closely with customers, understanding their needs, and working alongside them to make improvements. So one example could be where we were helping a customer understand how they an upgrade they were thinking of doing to one of their vessel propulsion systems was going to improve their fuel consumption for the vessel and their emissions. So we analysed the data from one of their vessels for the past couple of years and looked at what that was consuming throughout that period, and then we looked at ways how the hybrids or how the propulsion system upgrade could actually improve based on that baseline, and we could then show them. In this case, we were talking about $120,000 of fuel savings in a year just from our improvement, and almost 300 tons of CO2. But what we could then do, and this was the really valuable part, is that once the customer had decided, based on our recommendations, decided to do the upgrade, we could actually look and see, okay, how have they actually performed after the upgrade? How have they achieved the same results as we predicted? And we could see that yes, they have improved. They have saved some fuel, and they have saved some. They emit less, but not to the level that we expected. And in that case, it was a simple answer as to why. It was because the crew were operating the vessel as they had done before. They weren't using it the way they should in order to make those improvements. So that was a very, by analysing the data after the upgrade, we could actually see that and tell them, with a bit of training, you can get up to the predicted savings, and they did. But then after that, it was the customer asked us, okay, this is fantastic, and we were by that time very close with the customer, and they asked us, okay, what more can we do? And then we said, okay, well, you can do an additional upgrade, but with this one upgrade, you can reach savings of almost $500,000 a year and 1,000 tons of CO2. But it was through that dialogue, through that collaboration, that we could actually bring about these savings and make the customer happy through the service we provide.
Brilliant, and lots of questions off the back of that, Jan. Maybe the first one is I love how you've built that ROI, and I presume that was sort of a target throughout. You set that in advance. Do you have sort of a checklist for every project that, in order to make it successful? And what tends to be the success criteria that you look to put in place before you set into something that will take weeks and months of investment?
What we found is that a lot of the time we just want to start small. So we want to just if we're going to come into a dialogue with the customer, we just get hold of some data and show them what we see. For example, we could just take some data that's freely available online for looking at vessel position, vessel speed, things like that, and give the customer, this is your operating profile for the past year or two. And some of them don't realize how the vessels are operating. And we could even from that just see, well, you're operating at a speed which is much lower or maybe much higher than your design speed for your vessel. And why are you doing that? Is there a way you can change to the design speed and maybe see the improvements already just from there? And then we can look at how many engines are you coming on using online when you're operating? How are you? Just simple operational tweaks, and just start small, and then what we always find is that over time, or once we've presented the data to the customer, they'll say, this is really interesting. How about this? What about this? How can we do this? And they start coming up with ideas. And then we can say, well, what we need is we need this data set, and we need to do this, and we need to do this, and then we can work together, and then it sort of just transitions into a bigger case study, bigger project.
Yeah. And so for those that aren't completely familiar with Kongsberg, then could you just quickly explain who those customers are in your case?
Yeah. So the customers we work with primarily are vessel operators and vessel owners. It could be a customer or a vessel owner or operator that operates a ferry or a platform supply vessel, an offshore supply vessel. It could be a cruise ship. It could be a fishing vessel. It could be a tug. And everything and anything in between.
Okay. And have you changed some of your business models with these customers based on this now explosion of data and work of your analytics team?
Yeah, in some cases we do look at ways we can actually partner with customers. So we could take more ownership of the operation of the machinery we deliver to a vessel. Kongsberg delivers big machines, winches, thrusters, propellers, things like that. And we understand very well how the machinery operates, and we can take more ownership of the operation, and we could say to the customer, well, over the next 5 years, for a certain price, we're going to take care of all service, all maintenance, everything. And you just have to pay a fixed yearly fee. So, and it could be, a pay by the hour sort of business model where we would say, every hour your equipment is online or running, you pay us a certain amount, and we'll keep that machine operating. And so it's a different approach than how the traditional business model, which is we react to customer saying, this propeller or this thruster has broken down, we need to order spare parts, we need to order service. A very reactive way of doing things. Whereas now we want to be proactive, we want to get in front, and we want to help the customer understand when something is going to start failing, and then plan for that and avoid that failure. Do the maintenance in advance, do it when it's most convenient and not in the middle of a critical operation. And just help the customer keep operating as much as possible.
Okay. And is this what we'd call predictive maintenance then, moving into that sort of, from condition-based, let's say, to predictive? Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So we offer varying levels of condition monitoring services. Your basic condition monitoring to condition-based maintenance for certain equipment, all the way up to predictive maintenance. And that's where we start applying digital twins of our products, and using those digital twins to understand the remaining useful life of components within that product.
You've touched on my favorite subject, yeah. The digital twin.
I thought I had.
I see my wry smile.
Yeah.
No, this comes up a lot on the show, and yeah, I'm very passionate about this potential for simulation and data and merging them in sort of hybrid models towards the digital twin. And you spoke about the potential already. So in Kongsberg case, what does a digital twin mean, and how do you apply it then? You've mentioned it briefly, but how could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we look at a digital twin in different ways. I mean, a digital twin, it can be a buzzword, but for us, it can be one of three things. It can be a 4D, what we call a 4D model of a machine, say, and that's a 3D representation that can also move and operate. Then we have what's called behavioral models, and that's how the product or the machine behaves under certain circumstances, what external stimuli will do to it, and things like that. And then we have what I'm focused on, which is the diagnostic models, and these are where we can look at or use digital twins to understand how the components within the model are starting to degrade, given certain inputs or certain actions, and use that to understand how much time that component has left of its life, and that's a growing field. It's something we have some experience on, and we're going to start rolling out digital twins for more and more of our products in our product portfolio.
Yeah, and I guess is that sort of a focus then? I know we spoke about 5 years ago. We spoke a little bit about today. In 5 years, is that sort of the end goal, to have a digital twin remaining useful life of all assets in production to the contracts that desire that?
In 5 years' time, we're going to be seeing not just product digital twins, but vessel digital twins. So the customers are going to start asking for us to provide our products digital twins that can be integrated into a vessel digital twin, or even in some cases when we are the designer, we would supply the vessel digital twin, and then there's that breeds a whole new load of opportunities.
Yeah, exciting.
yeah, it's really exciting. There's a lot to do.
yeah. On the point you mentioned about some of the projects, you spoke about the savings in terms of money on maintenance and spare parts, and in terms of emissions. And I love that, and I hope in the future more and more people put that as a huge ROI. I know that's something you're very passionate about, building this sustainable maritime future. Can you speak a bit more about why that's important to you, Jan, this sustainable maritime future?
I think every industry needs to focus on how sustainable they're operating and what more they can do, because we only have one planet, and we each one of us as individuals has a responsibility to be more sustainable, to live more sustainably, and it's been one of the things that I've actually been looking for during my career, looking for roles where I can maybe contribute in some way to a more sustainable future. One of my first roles was in designing and developing LNG fueled propulsion systems as a much greener fuel. And there are a lot of new fuels coming up now, which are becoming more and more interesting in at least in our industry. And it's really great to see that the industry and society as a whole is really starting to take sustainability seriously, and it's becoming front and center to everyone's strategy. So it's a good time to be doing this.
Yeah. When you work in that sort of space and when you're passionate about that, what are the things that you've seen? You mentioned some greener fuels. What are some of the things you've seen of recent that really gets you excited about how maybe hopefully we're improving in this aspect?
Greener fuels is one, but we're also seeing, as an example, offshore wind is something I was a little bit skeptical about for a long time.
Not if you lived in Ireland, Jan.
No. But it seemed like more of a a political thing that was just nice for the politicians to play around with. But it's been a real success, and I think now in the UK, it's wind is responsible for, I think, 25% of domestic power production, which really I think is just so positive.
Good. Things are going in the right direction in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And as we sort of come towards the end here, I want to just use you as a great example again. You're somebody who came from engineering. You're now head of analytics at Kongsberg. You're doing amazing projects, and I speak to tons of engineers that are making that transition now, either from themselves or being tasked with that transition. Based on, generally engineers are technical minded, they're domain experts. Maybe they don't have that data science knowledge, but as you said, sometimes that's less important, and there are tools out there now to help them along that way. So for people out there that are making this transition, do you have any sort of advice to them, maybe 2 pieces or 3 pieces of advice to smoothen that transition, ensure they're focusing on the right things?
Yeah, I think in general, it's always worth just doing a little bit more than just what your job description is, just on a general basis, to maybe explore. Maybe if you're an engineer and a little bit interested in data, go out and try and do something. Try and reach out for opportunities where you could explore that interest. I think try and stay curious, learn as much as you can. Take the opportunities that come along, and seek out the opportunities that don't. But also, and this really applies to my transition into the field of data science, is that I was given this advice. This doesn't come from me, but this I think this is worth repeating. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because going from being an expert in your field of engineering to leading a group of data scientists where you are by no means an expert, it's fairly uncomfortable, and not just that. In other ways, maybe you're uncomfortable public speaking, or you have something you think is a weakness. Turn it into an opportunity for growth, and don't be discouraged if it turns out to be a pretty hard period of growth, because it is. I mean, it does take time and it does take effort, but it's absolutely worth it, and it does get easier with time.
Yeah. And do you have any resources that helped you in that process that could help others, whether it be books or presentations or podcasts or anything like that?
Going into data science from not knowing very much, these books for dummies were actually quite useful. But actually, if there's any book that helps you maybe learn Python or learn R or anything like that, it's worth picking up and just working through. Just to develop an understanding of how things work in that space. As a leader, I don't really work so much directly with data anymore, but it's always useful to understand how things work.
As you say, sort of be curious and seek out those opportunities. Excellent. Exactly. Jan, as a final question, we spoke about a lot of great things today. What makes you most excited about the next 5 years as the head of analytics at Kongsberg?
I think it's just an exciting period we're in right now in the marine industry. There's a lot of new technologies being introduced. Sustainability is front and center, as I mentioned. There's a lot of demand from customers for new business models, new ways of working, new services. So there's so many interesting challenges out there that the next 5 years is going to fly by.
Excellent. Very exciting. I look forward to it, Jan. Thanks very much for joining the show, and I'm sure we'll speak soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Now, next up on altair.com/Future Says will be Ravi Parmeswar, Vice President of Business Intelligence at Johnson & Johnson. Hope to see you there.